Hello and welcome to another Python programming tutorial from Programming to Success. Today we will be looking at inputs and if-else-elif statements in Python. Before we start, let's have a quick review of what we learned in our last video. We continued with data structures and types, and we looked at dictionaries and sets. In addition to that, we looked at some functions we can use, such as the del function or the clear function that we used with dictionaries. We also learned about some comparison operators that you can use with sets. Now, without further ado, let's get on with today's lesson. Chapter 1. Inputs. Input statements use the Python built-in input function to just capture and use data given by the user. The syntax for writing an input statement is shown below. We say the variable name, assignment operator, input, and then whatever we want to display on the screen. So this will allow the user to type in a response to whatever we display on the screen, and that response will be stored inside the variable name. So we can use input statements to ask a question and get an answer back. Writing input statements. Now we will write our first input statement. How about we ask the user to type in their initials, and then we'll print their initials back to them. So let's open up an IDLE file, and we'll just write the input statement. First, we have to create a variable name. Let's just call it initials. And then we store input. And then what do we want to be displayed on the screen? You can just say type in your initials. And then we can have a colon here. And now, if we print out initials and we run our code, let's see what we get. First, Python will display type in your initials, colon, on the screen. And then we can type in our initials. We can just say whatever you want. I'll just say AA. And now if we press the enter key, AA is returned back to us because Python looked at whatever was stored inside initials. And because we typed in AA was stored inside the variable name initials. So AA was returned back to us. Note that we do not need to use letters here because Python does not really know initials have to be letters. So whatever we type in basically will be returned back to us. So if we say 100, 100 is returned back to us. Now, if you want to put a space here, like a space in between the colon and AA, so it doesn't look all jumbled together, this is how you do it. Right here, just inside of the quotes, put a space. Now, the new string will be printed back to us. It'll give you a space here to type in your initials. And then AA gets returned back to us like before. More on inputs. Now let's do something a little more complicated. How about we tell the computer to ask us our name, and then we type in our name. Finally, we will ask the computer to print out nice to meet you, and then our name together as a sentence back to us. So, this is how we would do so. We would first have to create a variable name like before. Let's just call this name equals to, or assignment operator, input, what is your name? So what is your name will be displayed back to us. And we can put a colon and a space there. Now, if we want a sentence to be printed out, we would say this, print, and then our string, which is nice to meet you, comma, and then a space. And then if we want to add whatever is stored inside the variable name into the sentence, we would just put another comma and then name. So this will basically join together whatever is stored inside name and nice to meet you and return it back as a sentence. So if we run our code, Python will say, what is your name? And you can type in your name. If you say Bob, you get nice to meet you, Bob, because Python combined whatever was stored inside name and nice to meet you. In this case, Bob was stored inside name, so you got nice to meet you, Bob. Well, that will be it for inputs, and let's move on to the next chapter. Now let's get on with chapter 2 of today's video. Chapter 2. If, else, and elif statements. If statements. If statements are Python statements that execute a piece of code if a condition is met. Conditions are statements that control the flow of a program's execution. In our case, conditions and if statements will be a Boolean expression. Boolean expressions are statements that have to be true or false, like we learned in one of our previous videos. The syntax for creating an if statement is shown below. You say if, and then in parentheses your Boolean expression, an expression that has to be true or false, and then a colon, and then in the next line, the code that we want to be executed if that if statement is true. That code has to be indented. This is very important. So in this case, if our Boolean expression is evaluated to be true, that code will be executed. If the Boolean expression is evaluated to be false, Python will leave the whole if structure. Whatever is inside of this box is what we call the if structure. Practicing if statements. Now just follow and code along. So let's write our first if statement. We say if, and then parentheses, colon. Inside the parentheses, we have a Boolean expression that just says 7 is greater than 5, because this statement has to be true or false. That's why it's a Boolean expression. If we press the Enter key, Python will automatically indent it for us. So we can just type in any code we want to be executed. I'll just say print if, because this is the if statement. Now if we run our code, if will get printed out because Python saw the word if. So it went inside this statement and evaluated 7 is greater than 5, and it found it to be true. So Python went inside the if structure and executed this code. However, if we make a small change here, now we run our code, nothing will get printed out because this statement was evaluated to be false by Python. So Python, without even going in, will just leave the whole if structure, so nothing will be executed. If-else structure. We use the if-else structure if we want Python to do something for sure. This structure basically says, if the if statement is true, go inside the if statement and do that code. If the if statement is evaluated to be false, leave the if statement and automatically go inside the else statement. So this is the syntax for an if-else structure. We have the same if structure, and then else, colon, our code. We don't need a Boolean expression here because if the if statement is true, the else statement has to automatically be false. If the if statement is false, the else statement has to automatically be true. That's just how it works. So one way or another, one of them has to be true, and only one of them will be true. So in this case, if we have this, Python will first see the word if, so it'll evaluate the Boolean expression. If it's true, Python will do this code. If it's false, Python will leave the if structure and automatically come inside the else structure and do this code. So let's try this out. What if we say, in addition to this, else, print, else. Now if we run our code, else will be printed out. Because like before, this statement is false. So Python left the whole if structure. And now that it sees the word else, it'll automatically go inside the else statement and execute this code. If-Elif-Else structure. What if you want to have more than 2 of those statements? What if you want 3, 4? The answer is simple, elif. If you use elif in your code, Python will first evaluate the if statement like usual. If that if statement is false, Python will go on to the elif statement and evaluate that Boolean expression. If that Boolean expression is true, Python will do that code inside of the elif statement. If it's false, Python will leave the whole elif structure and go inside the else. So in this case, Python will do this Boolean expression first. If it's true, Python will do this code. If it's false, Python will go here to the elif and do this Boolean expression. If that's true, Python will do this code. If that's false, Python will leave the elif structure and automatically go inside the else and do this code. So let's try this out. What if we say, in addition to this, elif 7 is equal to 5. Equal to is 2 equal symbols, remember. So now if we do that, and we can say print elif, now if we run our code, else will be printed out because both of these statements were evaluated to be false. 7 is not less than 5, and 7 does not equal to 5. So both of these were false, so Python automatically did this. However, if we make a change here and say 7 is not equal to 5, now we run our code, if-Elif will be printed out because this statement was evaluated to be true. 7 is different than 5. So Python does this code. And after it's done with this code, it'll see the word else. However, it already executed one of the statements. One of the statements was already true, so this has to automatically be false. So Python will leave the whole structure. Using if-Elif-Else statements with inputs. Now let's try using these statements with inputs, which we learned earlier in our video. How about we create an example where we ask the user to type in their age, and then we decide if they are fit to ride a roller coaster or not. So first, we'll create a variable called age and store input, type in your age. So whatever the user types in will be stored inside of the variable age. Now if we create an if statement saying if age is greater than 8, print you can ride the roller coaster. And then we can say else print sorry, you cannot ride the roller coaster yet. Now if we run our code, it'll first ask us to type in our age. So we type in our age. What if we say 10? We'll get an error. This is because Python does not know how to compare two different types. In this case, age is a string, but 8 is an integer. We're comparing two different types. Python does not know how to do this. So the simple solution for this is to convert the string age to an integer. That might sound tough, but it's actually really simple. All you have to say is int, which stands for integer, and put parentheses around age. This is basically saying whatever age is, convert it to an integer type, and then you can compare the two, because we're comparing two of the same type. It'll allow us. So if we run our code now, it'll say type in your age. If we say 10, you can ride the roller coaster, because 10 is greater than 8. It was true, so Python did this statement. However, if we say however, if we say something like 5, they'll say, sorry, you cannot ride the roller coaster yet. This is because 5 is not greater than 8. It was evaluated to be false. So Python left the if structure and automatically went inside the else structure and did this code. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for the next video that will be coming soon. Please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you in the next video.